So our next speaker is going to be Anuj Mubayi from the Center for Collaborative Studies in Mathematical Biology at Illinois State University, and he is going to be giving his talk on multi-resolution modeling and evidence generation, implications from social issues to physician health. So I will hand the floor off to him, and I hope that you all enjoy this talk.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Greetings, everyone. Again, was listening to other talks, also very interesting conversations on different topics. So I thought of doing also a little bit different flavor than other talks, and wanted to talk about some of the things that we are discussing, and we have learned it from the COVID-19 challenges, and how we are addressing those challenges, and we are calling that methodology as a multi-resolution modeling. And there are some challenges that happens with evidence generation. Evidence is the data that goes in the model, or that is used to validate the model. Okay, where is my screen? It is. Okay, so my outline of my talk is actually I will be talking a little bit about historical perspective, some modeling challenges that we faced from COVID-19, some techniques that we are now used to using, but we lack some kind of skill set in that as a modeler. And then, can you all see my screen, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, awesome. And then basically, I will be talking about that multi-resolution approach that I'm mentioning in here. So I want to start with this book, which is a very old book. This was published in 1974, and the title was Who Shall Live? And there's multiple examples of real life and social science, and as well as healthcare sectors. By the way, I'm working in a healthcare, so I do use many examples from historical perspective from healthcare in my modeling work. So there's one example in particularly where the authors discusses that in 1970s, Nevada and Utah has very similar healthcare use pattern. How people were using healthcare were very similar to in both the states, and the size was almost similar. But the average life expectancy was quite different in the two states in 1970s and early. So this remains a big puzzle in a healthcare sector. Why, if all the infrastructure and the way healthcare is used currently remains the same, why the life expectancy differs between the two states? So it's until 90s, it was not clear why it was the case. And it was realized, the authors, in 1970, it was not clear. So authors did some kind of data analysis, additional data analysis, and suggested later on that it was health behaviors and social factors. They were quite different between the two states, and therefore that was impacting how long people live and quality of the life also in the two states. So he stresses the fact that, what is important in that is we have to make a judgment call in light of expanding data, but not only that, also in impact of based on new statistical or methods in general that are available. And many times what happens, we as a modelers have learned something in our doctorate program or in somewhere, and we use it as a hammer every time we see a problem, and we try to apply the same problem everywhere. So this is the important examples which highlights some of the challenges we face when we addresses the issues from a real life today's. For example, a lot of mathematical textbooks are using physics-based examples, which were 80s, it was 1980s, it was quite important, and 90s, it was quite important, but now biological importance have started to pick up. And so the examples in the classroom or in the real life needs to be changed or maybe directed in a different dimension. Now, another example I wanted to mention to you, and this is related to the evidence. What is that evidence? We always talk about, oh, we have built a mathematical model. Where could we find the data, right? So I want to stress something here is that, big tech are Microsoft, Apple, Amazon. These are the big tech companies, and they have been pioneered in technological tools. But they failed in last decade and a half. They failed miserably in healthcare sector. And I'll give you an example, for example. So healthcare industry is very, very big. It's $4 trillion market. And so everyone wants to put their hands into it. So for example, Google Health was disbanded. The company was completely disbanded now, Google Health. Now they have a new one called as Google Worley, but Google Health is almost disbanded. There are few things they are doing, but not a big one. But 10 years ago, it was a big deal, by the way. Same thing like Apple. Apple used to have something called as Health Habit app, and it is scaled back. Now it is not anymore used. IBM used to have AI and data analytics platform, which were completely sold off. Watson is one of the research labs for IBM. And Amazon, Chase, and Berkshire's used to have something called as Health Haven, and it is also disbanded. They are not really putting any efforts into that. So the question comes, and this has happened in the last 10 years. And the question comes, they have lots of money, they have lots of resources. Why did they fail? Why did they fail? And there was many reasons that was analyzed. And according to me, what I think the reason they failed is because they were using all these applications, which was healthcare useful. They were using very small patient data at some point of time. Very early on, they collected some data from somewhere, and they kind of built an app and sold it in the market, but that was only helpful to the small group of patients. Another thing that they lagged was they had very extensive tech individuals working in that, but they were practitioners were missing in their team or clinicians. They used to consult, they had a consultation with practitioner very early on, but they were not doing it on a continuous basis. And that lacked the domain expertise. The third problem they realize is the healthcare data is a dirty data. That means it is unstructured and it is adapting every day. It is adapting every day due to many reasons, basically. So these three, I thought, was a main reason why that led to a downfall of these four giant softwares that was supposed to help the healthcare industry, but failed to do that in the last year. So these are the things that our student needs to understand and implement it accordingly while building mathematical models of some things. And that is very key aspects to modeling in the future. Now, I have also worked in infectious disease modeling. I have, so I want to discuss where do we stand in infectious disease model? What is the modeling history tells us? In last 2 decades, actually, it has been 100 years since Ronald Ross has got a he had a malaria models which 1902, and so and in fact John Grant was the first one in 1600 that categorized mortality in the city based on the disease, and just a table at that time 1600, the table categorized based on disease and characteristics and symptoms, mortality data. That table itself was a model in 1600. In 1900, Ronald Ross and his 2 students, Kermack and McKendrick, basically developed the epidemiological modeling theory, which is round about 100 years old now. And they brought this threshold phenomena, which we call it today as a reproduction number. Well, But actually, these modeling work has been in patches in the last century. And it has not been a continuous growth of the models. It is only in the last 2 decades that it has picked up quite drastically. For example, in 2001 and 2003, there was a foot-mouth disease in UK, and they used data-driven mathematical model, epidemic models, first time. And there was a cycle of modeling exercise with the new data collections, and that's how they were making policy on that. So it was very useful at that time, foot and mouth, but the models were very elementary in terms of what it can give as a decision-making process. Okay. So we were learning for the last 2 decades. Last 2 decades is the first time, we started with data-driven practical application, not theoretical models. But it was not until this 2000, the 9/11 attack and anthrax attack and, SARS outbreak, first one, CoV-1, and also an influenza regular outbreak that realizes the US government to build a task force for it. So in 2005, this was the first time the task force, unique task force was established. And this unique task force, there was anthropology in that was a mathematician in it, there was a virologist in it, there was a historian was there. So there was various disciplines that were partnershiping to form this task force, and it was heavily funded at that time because many things were happening like after 9/11, and they were afraid of bioterrorist attacks also. So what has that task force did? Well, if you recall, 1918 Spanish flu was very bad outbreak for humanity, and it has killed millions of people. And but this disease was not studied until this task force came into existence. And then there was a series of papers understanding that 1918 Spanish flu. And there were lots of literature that came, but they were basically devoted to flu at that time. And since 2005 till 2012, there is extensive amount of influenza that we learned about influenza and many outbreaks that has happened in the past, especially 1918 Spanish flu. So this was the true fact, and that is the time when we also understood something called as flattening the curve. Basically, flattening the curve is this. If you see on the right side the picture, if the peak is the red one, you are pushing the peak to the right and lower. And basically what you are doing is you are delaying the epidemic, and you are reducing the number of cases at the given time to be low. And the reason you want to do that is because you have limited healthcare resources, and you want to use those resources if anyone gets a serious symptoms. So this is very helpful, and that was called as a flattening the curve, and that the term came into existence due to the work from the task force and the collaborators for that team. So that was the big history. But remember, that also led to flu forecasting. And if you recall, there is a word that you are probably hearing in the news called as ensemble modeling technique. That means there are a collection of models used for same under different assumption. Each model having different assumption, and you are doing the same prediction using all the models, and you are averaging the result of some sort to give the final prediction of the outbreak. So flu forecasting started in 2013, and that was a result of this funding to the task force. By the way, in 2014 onwards, the funding decreased quite drastically. It was, in fact, at some point of time, this task force was dismantled and have only few folks into it, not interdisciplinary. And actually that led, some people says that might have led to the seriousness of COVID-19. If that task force would have been there with the full capacity as it was in 2005 onwards until 2013, the COVID would have not impacted us as much. as it did in the last 2 years. So that was the good history of that. So flu forecasting started in ensemble. It was done in patches. Ensemble models are now become techniques for understanding the epidemics. So now, what do we do with that? I mean, why do we build a model? What is the purpose of the model, basically? So this is a paper that is published in Science in some years back in 2009. Actually, this was also part of the task force efforts. They talk about, there are many things you can do with the model. For example, if you go from left to right, so in the bottom, you can see you can estimate key parameters. For example, how fast is disease spreading, right? So you want to know on an average how fast is disease spreading in a certain city. So that could help you in estimating the key parameters. Second thing, it is also help in linking different scales of data. For example, you have demographic data to epidemiological data to clinical data, for example, in the hospital setting. It links these data. But again, this is a multi-scale modeling is also very challenging, and there are other challenges associated with it. It can study why a certain observed patterns are happening. What is the reason that are causing these cases to occur more in a certain place than in others, for example, right? Or there is any external factors that are climatic factor, for example, driving the case to occur in a certain months of the year. And other thing that it can do is control measures. So if you put a control, how much of impact this controls will do to the outbreak in future. Because otherwise you have no information. If you wait for empirical data, that would take, you have to wait for it. And the model can help in that. And this last thing, which I think is less work, math models are not meant for that thing, but people do that thing, is the prediction. So prediction is, we are not yet there to make an accurate predictions, just like climatic predictions, or even in some cases, financial institute models that do it. The disease models still have a lot of challenges associated with it, but people do predictions. So I see there is so 5 minutes are left. Okay, I'm going very slow. Thank you for that. So there are limitations. The limitations are basically strains, evolving strains, population behavior are changing, population heterogeneity, chronic disease related to it. There are many features that led it to challenges with the disease. So what are the modeling techniques? Well, the modeling techniques captures population mixing, how the population is mixing in the population, how age group makes, how gender makes, how race and ethnicity makes. All these things are population mixing. How is the population behaviors due to intervention? Intervention impact changes the behavior of the. So there is small peak and then large peak, or the large peak then. So you have to capture that features. Or fear of infection. There's a shoulder and plateau that you have observed, people observe due to the fear of infection. So these have to be captured in the model. So there has to be certain nonlinearity that goes into the model that creates that kind of trends, patterns, basically. So, so in the modeling world, what we do is there are different layers of models, and in order to make a policy decisions, we are looking at disease dynamics that we focus on, but economic modeling also, population behavior modeling, and psychological, the mental impact modeling also is now coming into pictures. So anyway, I'll go to so I'll give you this examples of sickle cell disease. There was a treatment of sickle cell disease that impacted the income of an individual. So here we are using different layers of models like PKPD, pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics model. We are using climate model like catastrophic models. And then we are using regression models, simples, and finally dynamic models of economic models. So different types of model to come out to the answer. And the answer was based on what happens if you give a treatment in the body in a human, how much income it will generate for that patient. So think about the scales are very different. You're talking about treatment inside the body to income in few years down the line. So quite interesting example in that regard. Actually, I will skip there. So I want to show you this model actually of malaria. There is humans, mosquitoes, bacteria. They are now bacteria are basically these are malaria model is very common. So usually it is humans and mosquitoes are used, but the bacteria are biolarvicides. Basically, these bacteria eats the larva, and this is the control that is used. So how do you estimate the evidence for it? How do you get the estimates of it? So there are different steps you do. You need to scale it down, for example, because whole model, you don't have the estimates of it. So you divide the model into small chunks, and then you kind of find out if there is estimates data for available for each one of it, and then you kind of use it to estimate the parameter. So for example, you use literature review and census data. For example, you use time series data of mosquito abundance. You use time series of cases, incidence count. And you also use, for example, in this bacteria count and how the bacteria are working in terms of killing the larvas, basically. So different set of small models are used to estimate, and then you put it back in the main model, all the estimates to draw the conclusion. So what is a multi-resolution approach? I will come directly here, because this is the paper that we've published in 2022. And we talked about, things are changing. It is not the same model, same methods that we used to use is applicable anymore, if we really want to address the real life problems. So there is a word called as nowcasting that we are doing, which is basically updating the new information in the model in a real-time basis. That is called as nowcasting. We are also using Pareto principle, optimization problem, which is basically saying, for stakeholders are different for the output. For example, patients versus healthcare insurance companies. Their goals are very different. So the optimal solution needs to be many of them and not single optimal solution. So that is called as a Pareto principle behind the scene. And of course, community partnership is what we are trying to stress upon in this models. So I'll stop here with these conclusions. I know the time is almost over. So the one thing which is highlighted in here today by me is like partnership model is the key for value estimation. We should not marry to a type of model or data sets. It's an adaptive procedures. And there is a multi-resolution approach that we are trying to build upon that requires the use of community. The people who are getting the benefit of that intervention needs to be also incorporated in this type of modeling. So I'll stop here. I think that is all I have. Let me see. Yeah, that is all I have. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much for your presentation.
Yeah.
We may have time for a couple questions if anyone has any lasting questions from this talk.
Hi, Anju. This is Leela Rakesh from Michigan.
Sure.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Right.
Okay. So the overall, your message is that the existing, Kermack and McKendrick or the, these Rosses developed in the, 1900s, we should not be, it's not, I'm telling you, we should not be utilizing. We should look much beyond that, because the new technologically a new life, a new way of spreading the disease is much higher than the olden time. And we really need, these, we call it as a vector-borne transmission. And these kind of information with the aid of a multidisciplinary, area, we need to incorporate to get an actual picture rather than a data-driven models. Am I right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think what
You
is
know, why I said is we just finished up a paper on the COVID-19, and we are basically two kinds of things. We are trying to look at different kind of theory in mathematics, something called a graph theory, and how, each of these variable weigh at different node. And we also incorporated it, so, I don't know, many people will find it difficult to say that. We incorporated this concept. It's almost like we can think of this as a viscoelastic media.
Mhm.
I don't want to bring all those viscoelastic theory into here. We brought out that concept. What exactly you said is correct. So we are just tuned to just look at the data. Okay, we can't get it. Let's get this one done. Then different people can come up with different kind of outcome. And they try to impose that on, whoever is in the political side or in the American, we are talking about American healthcare or every healthcare.
Mhm.
And they're imposing whoever is in the higher power.
Right.
And models should not be based on any of these influences. Models should be related to the interdisciplinarity or multi-scaling concept. I fully, 100%, I agree with you. This is what the mistake of the system, because, we are feeding this one. You will get maybe one group of people that might follow that. That doesn't follow. When it comes to a whole world, the healthcare, it doesn't come up with one fit for all.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, we just finishing up a paper, we was coming out with something differently. And okay, it's fascinating. Excellent talk.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you, Bev, for your comment also. You made a very good point, actually. And I know our time is almost up, but stress upon one thing that I learned something in my graduate programs. And usually we stick to the same hammer and we try to implement that hammer in all the problems. And that's because I don't have a time to do many other things. But that should not be translated to our teachings to our students.
Exactly.
I think adaptability is very, very key, because I see my nephews who are very young and they can do TikTok video or they can do all these new gadgets very easily. But for me, it is very hard. But we need to train them, not to us. And so we have to adapt that thing, and that is very, very important aspects of the training.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I will be in touch with that. I just sent you my email.
Sure.
Get in touch with that. It's fascinating. I mean, I also talk because of, I have my family, many of them, my kids are all in the medical school. I can immediately see that one, oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Are you in Bombay? Where are you?
No, I'm in Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona.
Oh, you're in Phoenix, Arizona. Somehow it is appeared it as at Bombay or somewhere.
Oh, really?
Okay. So Bombay, Arizona has a great people, epidemiology. Yeah.
Yes, so sorry to interrupt this conversation. Thank you again for a wonderful talk. I would just like to say that the conference is actually coming to an end, so please go to the main room at this point. We will be shutting down this room, the main room. They're going to do some closing and farewells, and then I believe that Gather will still be open for a little bit of time after if you'd like to walk around, chat with colleagues, and catch up. But thank you so much for coming today, and thank you again to our amazing presenter. Please head on over to the main room at this time.
Well,
Rachel,
thank you,
you
Rachel.
did a good job. Rachel, you did a good job.
Yeah, Rachel, you moderated very well. Thank you for
Yep.
moderating our session.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for the wonderful talk.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great talk.
Thank you. Thank you.